Meet Charlie. In 2012, he inherited a sum of €100,000. The bank offered Charlie an annual interest rate of 2.5%, while his friends suggested investing the sum in the Maltese stock exchange. Had he taken up the bank's offer, his €100,000 would now be worth $122,000. Investing in the stock exchange would have meant that the value of his inheritance would now stand at $128,000. Instead, Charlie went for a third option and used his money to buy an apartment which, by the end of 2020, was worth €178,000. Despite the pandemic, the residential property market has been breaking record after record. Which got us thinking, why do property prices in Malta keep rising? Like any other market, property prices are a result of the interaction between buyers and sellers. More buyers for a product allow the seller to ask for a higher price. On the other hand, when many sellers compete to sell their house to a few buyers, sellers slash prices to have a better chance of making a deal. In recent years, the increase in demand for property has far exceeded the increase in its supply, creating the perfect recipe for the record price increases we've seen in Malta over the last decade. But what has led to this scenario? There are many reasons, but to fully understand the bigger picture, we must go back to 2014.
Malta reġgħet irreġistrat tkabbir ekonomiku.
L-ekonomija Maltija se tkun l-aktar waħda li tikber.
Pajjiżna se jkollu l-ogħla rata ta' tkabbir ekonomiku fost il-pajjiżi kollha.
The government's business-friendly approach succeeded in boosting the economy, which in turn had a huge impact on the property market. This economic growth led to people having more money in their pockets, resulting in people being able to afford more goods and services. Meeting this new demand for their products meant that businesses were creating more and more jobs. Unemployment fell close to zero, and employers had to bring in more workers from abroad. This meant tens of thousands of people moving to Malta over a short period of time, and, obviously, needing a place to stay. Record-breaking tourist arrivals in Malta over recent years have been fueled by the introduction of low-cost airlines and increased connectivity. How is this related to property? Trends show travellers seeking out more value for money holidays, which they did by booking private accommodation through online platforms instead of conventional hotel stays. This created an additional income source from properties, further increasing the demand. One must also not ignore the impact of the Maltese government rolling out the Individual Investor Programme in 2013, which, amongst other criteria, required the purchase or rent of mid-priced property. Finally, bank interest rates have been very low for several years. On one hand, the cost of borrowing money to buy property is the cheapest it has ever been. At the same time, inexpensive financing has meant that speculators and property developers have been attracted to the profits they can make off the market by buying and selling property. When combined, these factors put together have driven the increase in demand for property, which has helped shoot prices upwards. Now let's look at the other side of the coin, supply. The most recent population census found that in 2011, there were more than 41,000 vacant properties. As demand gradually started to pick up in the years that followed, more people started making their vacant property available for sale or to rent out. However, the supply of newly available property on the market was insufficient to meet soaring demand. In response to the lack of available properties in the market, building regulation was amended through the relaxation of height limitations. Around this time, the Planning Authority also issued a record number of permits. These looser standards by the Planning Authority allowed for construction to run loose, with the Maltese skyline becoming dotted with towering cranes and high-rises, changing the Maltese landscape forever. Also, as a result of the increased activity in the property market, real estate agents were able to ask for higher commission rates, which from around 3% in 2008 have almost doubled in recent years. The increased demand for housing, the insufficient number of housing units and higher construction costs have together created the boom in property prices seen in recent years. Prices for all types of property have grown at a much faster rate when compared to incomes earned by families, which means that certain segments of the population are finding it increasingly difficult to afford purchasing a home. In fact, a report by KPMG found that young couples with median income would only be able to afford an average-priced apartment or a maisonette. This contrasts sharply with previous generations, where a young couple could afford an average-sized terraced house on relatively lower incomes than today. Buyers are being forced to pay increasingly higher prices for constantly smaller and arguably poorer quality housing units. The policy of meeting high demand for property through lax enforcement of construction standards has come at a high cost. On occasion, even at the loss of human life. High demand for property has been artificially boosted by unsustainable population growth and by speculators buying and selling property for profit, much like our friend Charlie. Increasing the tax on property profits may therefore level the playing field between different kinds of buyers. Young adults are effectively being priced out of the market by older speculators, whose lifetime savings give them a much stronger position in the market. And speculating in property is not even that valuable when compared with other investments. If Charlie had invested his €100,000 in the US stock market instead, by 2020, it would have been worth €283,000. With land so scarce, adopting a longer-term view of the property market means that we have to think carefully, keeping in mind that everything comes at a cost. Should we apply the brakes on rampant property construction? That may be reasonable, but supply will fall short of demand even further, so prices will continue to shoot up, making property even less affordable for the median income couples. Do we want more stringent height limitations? Fair enough, but that would lead to more development on undeveloped land. Shall we try and limit population growth? An understandable approach, but employers' biggest worry is a lack of manpower, and the economy may not function as smoothly as a result. A discussion about the Malta of tomorrow and, by extension, the property market, is a conversation about finding the right balance between many factors. A balance that can only be achieved through intelligent planning and a good deal of compromise by all of us.